Welcome to a deep dive. Today, we're opening up a stack of sources specifically. A fascinating text that pulls together teachings from different early Buddhist collections to really unpack two core ideas, compassion and emptiness.
That's right. Our mission here is to, well, get to the heart of how these concepts were understood and practiced way back in the earliest stages of Buddhist thought.
Yeah.
We want to see how they connect, what they meant for people on the path then, and, what potent insights they hold for you today.
So if you ever felt like compassion is just, I don't know, feeling sad for others or wondered how emptiness isn't about nothingness but relates to you, well, you're in the perfect place. Let's jump into this material and see what shakes out. Okay, let's unpack compassion first. The texts talk about Karun. At its core, what does that actually mean in this early context?
It's the wish for others to be free from affliction and suffering. Think of it as a positive active force, really. Something that arises when you genuinely open your mind to the pain in the world, and that moves you to want that pain to cease.
That distinction is key, isn't it?
Yeah.
The source is really clear that this isn't just about feeling the suffering with someone, just commiserating.
Exactly. It's not simply getting dragged down. Later traditions, like in the Visuddhimagga, they actually point out the near enemy of compassion is worldly sadness, getting pulled down by suffering alongside others, which isn't always helpful, right?
Right.
And the far enemy, well, that's the direct opposite, cruelty. So true compassion, according to these early sources, it's rooted in the active wish for relief.
So if it's an active wish, how did that wish most powerfully manifest in the early teachings? What was the main expression?
The sources point primarily to teaching the Dharma. That was seen as the peak expression.
Teaching the path itself.
Yes. Requests for instruction were often framed as being made out of compassion, sometimes using a related term, anakampa, which kind of signifies this active, responsive compassion.
Interesting.
And the act of sharing the path to freedom. Well, that was seen as maybe the greatest gift you could offer, way beyond material gifts. Something even noted in places like Ashoka's rock edicts, actually.
Offering the path to liberation, that's a profound expression of compassion. But hang on, before you can guide others, isn't there a really strong emphasis in these texts on cultivating your own state first?
Absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah. The source highlights the importance of self-cultivation as the necessary ground. There's this great stanza from the Udana Varga.
Oh, yeah.
First, one should establish oneself in what is proper, then advise others.
That could sound a bit selfish on the surface, like fix yourself first, then maybe get around to others.
Oh, yeah.
How does the source clarify that?
Well, it's not about neglecting others at all. The insight here is that you ground your ability to teach and help in your own, lived experience and practice. From the perspective of cultivating the path to liberation, purifying your own mind from defilements actually enables you to effectively and sustainably help others. Yeah. Your own inner clarity and strength become the foundation.
So it's building that internal stability. The source gives a really insightful image for this, doesn't it? The acrobats.
It does, exactly. Think of two acrobats.
Yeah.
To perform together successfully, high up on the wire, each one has to maintain their own balance first.
Right.
That individual balance is what makes it possible for them to then take care of each other. Meditative seclusion, personal practice.
Yeah.
It's building the inner balance.
That image lands powerfully. Yeah, and cultivating this state of compassion, especially in meditation, is called a liberation of the mind.
It's one of the brahmavihāras, the divine abodes. The source points to a really powerful teaching about someone born dwelling in the liberation of the mind through compassion, who simply wouldn't perform unwholesome deeds. It becomes almost second nature.
So it's not just a fleeting good feeling, it's a transformative state. It fundamentally reshapes your intentions, your actions, your very being, and kind of propels you forward on the path.
Exactly. It's described as a potent mental state that alters your entire relationship with the world. Really powerful stuff.
Now, compassion isn't alone in this set of practices. It's one of 4 qualities. How do the other brahmavihāras, loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, how do they all relate?
Right. So compassion, karu, is part of this set. You've got metta, loving kindness, wishing well-being, mudita, sympathetic joy, and upekkha, equanimity.
Okay.
Metta is the classic antidote to ill will or anger, wishing others well. Compassion also counters ill will, because it wishes for freedom from suffering, so they kind of work together, you see.
Got it. Sympathetic joy, mudita, seems a bit different, though. It's about rejoicing in others' happiness.
Yes, exactly. It's closely related to delight and rejoicing. And it stands out as a state of joy that, when cultivated boundlessly, also offers a temporary liberation of the mind. The source points out that sympathetic joy is Well, implicitly the opposite of envy and jealousy. Think about that story in the source,
Which one?
about the Buddha converting a prominent lay follower, but then encouraging him to keep supporting a rival group's teacher.
Oh, right.
The Buddha's attitude there wasn't one of wanting to see the rivals lose out or anything. It was one of wishing well for all, embodying that sympathetic joy, not being threatened by other success.
That example really clarifies how active and maybe even counterintuitive sympathetic joy can be rejoicing even in the success of those you might see as, well, competitors. But then there's equanimity, upekkha. For many, that sounds like indifference, which seems completely at odds with compassion.
That's a great question, and yeah, it's one the source addresses directly. While later traditions might wrestle with this apparent tension, in the early discourses, equanimity is presented not as indifference, but as a crucial complement.
A compliment. How so?
It's the appropriate, balanced attitude when active intervention or a specific compassionate response isn't possible, or maybe isn't even appropriate in that situation.
Like when you've offered help but someone isn't receptive. Or maybe when you're teaching but the disciples aren't paying attention, like the Buddha sometimes face.
Precisely. The source mentions the Buddha dwelling in equanimity in those moments. Equanimity counters aversion. It allows you to face difficult, even profoundly unpleasant situations. Well, the source uses extreme examples, like physical aggression or abuse, without losing your inner peace or balance.
So it's not checking out or not caring. It's maintaining a stable mind that can respond wisely or maybe refrain from an unwise response, depending on what the situation actually calls for.
Exactly that. The sources use similes like a solid rock, not shaken by the wind,
Mm-hmm.
illustrating how a wise person remains unmoved by fluctuating circumstances like blame or praise.
Mm-hmm.
There's also that intense simile of the saw, where you're encouraged to maintain equanimity, even under direct physical attack.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
intense. And the source even points to a reflection from the Puchabada Sutta, kind of reminding yourself it could be much worse, as a support for equanimity in tough spots.
Yes, that helps put things in perspective and maintain that inner stability. So equanimity really rounds off the set of brahmavihāras. It ensures that your compassion isn't driven by attachment or compulsion, and you have a balanced, positive orientation, regardless of what's happening outside.
Okay, so we've defined these core qualities and how they relate. What kind of transformative power do these practices hold? What are the benefits of cultivating them?
Oh, the benefits outlined in the source are vast.
Yeah.
Really vast. On one level, there's generating incredible merit.
Merit.
Yeah. Cultivating metta, even just for a brief moment, is presented as superior to making enormous material offerings.
Really?
Yes. The simile of the full moon is used. Its radiance outshines all the stars, right?
Right.
Just like the merit from metta outshines other meritorious deeds.
Yeah.
Or there's the cow milking simile, where even a brief radiation of metta is seen as more significant than countless other significant actions combined.
That really underscores the value placed on these internal mental states over, say, external rituals or gifts.
It absolutely does. And then there's also mention of practical protection, things like physical safety from harm, even from torture or robbers in some accounts.
Wow.
Plus other benefits like gaining concentration quickly, having a serene appearance, and passing away peacefully without confusion.
Protection, calm, serenity. But the source also points towards liberating potential, doesn't it? Something more profound.
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting. When combined with wisdom, cultivating boundless compassion and the other brahmavihāras can lead towards significant stages of awakening, even non-returning or higher, according to texts like the Karajaka Sutta.
On returning. Wow.
So they're not just skillful states for, having a better life now, but potent catalysts for actual liberation.
You keep using the term boundless radiation. Can you explain what it means for the mind to become great and boundless through these practices?
Right. So the source describes the mind becoming great, Magata, which means it kind of pervades a defined area, maybe like a kingdom or something, versus becoming boundless, Apag, which means it pervades without limits, without measure, in all directions.
Okay.
The radiation of the brahmavihāras is inherently boundless in its ideal form. And the source notes this boundless quality isn't restricted only to the deepest states of concentration, the jhanas. It can be developed even at lower concentration levels.
And these practices are called a liberation of the mind. How does this cultivation change how you experience things? Like how you experience the results of past actions, karma?
Well, a mind thoroughly steeped in the brahmavihāras is described as a potent, intentional state. And this state significantly impacts how the results of past karma are experienced.
How so?
The Source uses this incredible simile of a piece of salt thrown into the river Ganges.
Ah, I think I remember this one.
Yeah. A piece of salt would make a small cup of water totally undrinkable, right?
Sure.
But you throw that same piece of salt into the vastness of the Ganges, and it has virtually no effect. Similarly, the vastness of a boundless mind makes the limiting effects of past unwholesome actions, well, insignificant in comparison.
That's a profound idea that your internal spaciousness can actually dilute the impact of negative karma.
It is very profound. And there's another powerful image for how the mind is transformed. Painting on space.
Painting on space.
Yeah. Just as you can't paint on empty space because there's no canvas, right? There's nothing for the paint to stick to. In the same way, aversion and other unwholesome thoughts find no basis, no ground to take hold in a mind well established in boundless brahmavihāra radiation. They simply vanish against that vastness and spaciousness.
That connects beautifully with the idea of the mind becoming boundless. Okay, we've spent good time on compassion. Let's shift gears a bit to the other key concept in this deep dive. Emptiness. What does early Buddhist emptiness mean according to these sources? It's not nihilism, right?
No, definitely not nihilism. Drawing heavily on the analysis of the aggregates, early Buddhist emptiness, or not-self, anatta, does not mean nothing exists. The core insight is that things including you, me, all living beings, lack a substantial, permanent, unchanging self or essence.
So it's about the absence of a solid, independent, lasting core, rather than the absence of existence itself. It's how things exist, not if they exist.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And the primary method in the sources to understand this is analyzing our entire experience into 5 components, the aggregates, or khandhas.
Feeling, perception.
Right. Feeling, vibhana, perception, sanya, formation, sakkara, which includes our intentions and will, consciousness, viññāta, matter, rupa, the physical body. By seeing how each of these functions, how they arise and pass away, we see there's no stable self directing or residing within them.
And the similes the source provides for the aggregates are really vivid illustrations of their empty nature, really help to grasp it.
They are fantastic, aren't they? Feeling is like water bubbles appearing and disappearing instantly. Totally ephemeral, nothing substantial there. Perception is like a mirage. It looks solid or real from a distance, but dissolves upon investigation. You can't grasp it.
Okay.
Formations, including our intentions and will, are compared to a plantain tree trunk. You know how you can peel away layer after layer?
Yeah, there's no solid core inside.
Exactly, no solid core, which really challenges the very idea of a fixed self, making decisions from some central command post.
That's a challenging thought, that even our will is seen in this way, as lacking a solid core, part of a process.
It's seen as a conditioned process, yeah, not something generated by a permanent entity. Then consciousness is likened to a magical illusion, inherently deceptive, void of anything ultimately real, and it provides the very basis for the mistake of identifying with a self.
And the body, matter.
Finally, the body, matter, is seen as just the interplay of elements earth, water, fire, wind. The source gives a powerful quote about contemplating the earth element within oneself. It is all not mine, I am not part of it, and it is not the self, just elements.
These images are powerful reminders that what feels so solid and permanent is, upon investigation, actually impermanent and without a core. So how do you take this understanding of emptiness and, practice it?
Well, the source suggests that cultivating tranquility and insight, often starting in seclusion like a forest, is the foundation. You need that calm mind.
Right.
And there's a description of a gradual meditative entry into emptiness, moving through stages like the perceptions of infinite space and infinite consciousness, where you progressively let go of coarser levels of identification with form and conventional reality.
Okay, that sounds quite advanced meditative. But how does this translate from deep meditation or seclusion into the messiness of everyday life?
That's where the practical application comes in. And it's surprisingly direct, most famously with the Bahiya instruction. Remember that one?
Vaguely. Remind me.
The core teaching there is about bare awareness. In the seen, there should just be what is seen. In the heard, just what is heard. In the felt, just what is felt. In the cognized, just what is cognized.
What does that look like moment to moment? Just raw observation without thinking about it.
It's about staying present with the bare sensory experience, and crucially, minimizing the mental proliferations, the stories, the judgments, the reactions, the craving or aversion that we normally pile on immediately after perceiving something.
The mental chatter.
Exactly. The source links this directly to dependent arising. By stopping at the basic act of cognizing, you don't automatically trigger the chain reaction that leads to craving, clinging, and suffering.
So you witness the input, the sight, the sound, without getting instantly tangled in the subsequent mental commentary or emotional reaction.
Precisely. And importantly, practicing emptiness in daily life isn't about shutting down your mind entirely or becoming a zombie. That's a misconception.
Good to clarify.
Yeah. The Source clarifies that it's about discerning between thoughts. You actively avoid detrimental and unwholesome thoughts, those based on sensual desire, ill will, or harming, and you actively cultivate wholesome thoughts, those based on dispassion, non-ill will, and non-harming.
Ah, okay.
This is actually seen as great comprehension, samaso kappa, part of the Eightfold Path, and as a way to inhabit emptiness, even while the mind is active and thinking.
That's a very practical guidepost, seeing which thoughts serve liberation and which don't, even within this framework of emptiness. Okay, the big question now. How do these two concepts, compassion and emptiness, which seem so different on the surface, actually fit together in early Buddhism? Focusing on the suffering of beings seems at odds with the idea there's no permanent self in those beings.
Right. This is where the specific presentation in the early discourses, as analyzed in the Source, is really key. That tension, while it becomes a bigger topic in some later commentary traditions, doesn't really arise in the same way here. And the reason is primarily because compassion is cultivated as boundless radiation.
Ah, the immeasurable quality we talked about earlier, the apamav. Back to that.
Right, because the practice is about pervading boundlessly without fixed targets. The issue of focusing on individual beings as substantial, separate entities isn't the primary lens in the same way.
Okay.
Furthermore, the Source is clear. Emptiness doesn't mean beings don't exist. It means they exist conditionally, dependently, without a permanent self. Compassion is perfectly compatible with seeing beings as impermanent, conditioned processes that still undeniably experience suffering. You feel compassion for the process of suffering itself, while understanding its empty, conditioned nature.
So it's seeing the suffering clearly, feeling for that suffering, but also seeing the underlying reality of impermanence and not self in whatever is experiencing that suffering.
Exactly, and the Source highlights how these two paths, tranquility, samatha, often develop through practices like the brahmavihāras and those gradual entry stages like infinite space and insight vipassana, seeing emptiness and not self, are mutually supportive. Two sides of the same coin, really. The Yuganada Sutta, cited in the Source, illustrates how they can be cultivated sequentially, one after the other, or even alongside each other, working together.
How do they strengthen one another? What's the synergy?
Well, insight into not-self can actually support tranquility. For example, contemplating the emptiness of self, even within deep meditative states like infinite consciousness, can help you let go and move to the next stage, the base of nothingness.
Ah, I see.
Conversely, tranquility practices provide the calm, focused, stable mind needed for deep insight into the true nature of reality, which is emptiness. You need that steadiness to see clearly. The Source emphasizes their collaboration, quoting something like, "Tranquility and insight are two qualities that in mutual collaboration lead to full liberation."
So they're not competing, but two wings of the same bird, as they say, both necessary for flight towards freedom.
Exactly, that's a perfect analogy. And the Source adds a subtle but really profound point with the dirty cloth simile.
The dirty cloth.
Yeah. Even after gaining insight into not-self, which is like washing away the major dirt from the cloth, a subtle tendency towards identification, the I am conceit, as Mimana, can linger, like a faint smell remaining on the otherwise clean cloth.
Even after seeing through the self.
Even then, fully eradicating this requires cutting through the deepest layers of subtle attachment, not by concluding, oh, nothing at all exists, but by fully letting go of that subtle, persistent I am tendency. It's deep work.
That idea that the I am lingers even after seeing emptiness is a powerful, maybe sobering reminder of the depth required on this path.
It shows the path isn't just intellectual understanding, it's a fundamental, ongoing transformation of being.
Let's quickly touch on a few more practical takeaways from the Source before we wrap up. How else can these practices help with common mental struggles, the stuff we deal with day to day?
Well, the brahmavihāras are excellent antidotes to the 5 hindrances, those common obstacles in meditation and life. Like metta and compassion are the classic counters to ill will and anger, obviously. The Source also notes that equanimity can even serve as an initial buffer when anger first flares up. It gives you that crucial bit of space before you maybe actively cultivate compassion or metta.
That's useful.
Yeah. Equanimity also helps calm restlessness and worry. And cultivating compassion can even help counteract doubt by highlighting the positive, altruistic motivation behind your practice.
And you mentioned wishing others to be at ease. The source gives a nuance to that, right? It's not just about comfort.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Wishing others to be at ease isn't just wishing them, a comfortable couch and no problems. It implies wishing them ease in wholesome ways, finding joy and peace through skillful actions and intentions. It links back nicely to sympathetic joy, wanting them to find true beneficial happiness.
Okay. And the process of cultivation itself, is it a forceful pushing, straining to feel compassion?
No. The Source explicitly says the boundless radiation is soft and gentle. It uses that simile of pulling away a curtain from a light source.
Right.
The effort isn't to force the light out,
Sure.
but to remove the barriers, the boundaries, the limitations we mentally place, allowing the mind's natural capacity for compassion or loving kindness to just be boundless. The strength grows with practice, sure, but the method is more about removing obstructions, not straining.
Letting it flow.
Letting it flow. Once the boundlessness is established, you simply remain in that spaciousness, and like that painting on space idea, distractions they don't stick. They have no ground.
And for the gradual entry into emptiness through those meditative stages, is patience key. Can't rush it.
Absolutely. The Source advises taking considerable time with each step, like really dwelling in infinite space or infinite consciousness, allowing that perception and the understanding it brings to fully mature before moving to the next stage.
Yeah.
The deep unfolding, a process that really can't be rushed. So pulling it all together, this deep dive into the sources really shows us that compassion and emptiness in early Buddhist teachings aren't opposing forces or even totally separate paths. They are deeply interwoven, mutually supportive aspects of practice. Cultivating boundless compassion fundamentally reshapes our engagement with the world and others, while understanding emptiness frees us from that fundamental illusion of a fixed, independent self.
It feels like these texts offer incredibly sophisticated yet somehow practical ancient tools for navigating the core challenges of human existence, dealing with suffering, our own and others, handling difficult emotions like anger or envy, and seeing through the mistaken ways we define ourselves and the world around us. That image of the subtle I am tendency lingering even after profound insight, that's a powerful and humbling thought, isn't it?
Indeed. Very humbling. And the practical guidance from the Bahiya instruction on bare awareness right down to the discernment of wholesome versus unwholesome thoughts, it really emphasizes that this wisdom isn't meant to stay in a book or just on a meditation cushion.
Right.
It's intended to transform how you live, speak, and act in every single moment. It's lived wisdom.
It really makes you reconsider your sense of self and your connection to others. If there's no solid, permanent you or them, what does that truly mean for how compassion flows? How does that boundless radiation interact with the empty nature of who is radiating and who is supposedly receiving?
Precisely. That's the edge to explore. It invites you to consider, if emptiness reveals the impermanent, dependent, conditioned nature of everything, including yourself and others, how does that fundamental understanding deepen and transform the boundless potential of compassion in your own life? That's definitely something worth reflecting on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope this exploration has offered some potent insights for you to carry into your own understanding and perhaps even your practice.